Everybody hates Jeffrey Nipples. I'm pretty upset I didn't make the thumbnail, but contrary to what I actually thought, a lot of people aren't a big fan of Jeffrey Nipples' training philosophy. And it seems the issue that most people have a problem with is Jeffrey's obsession with the length and position, or as I like to say, Jeffrey's stretch fetish.
The internet thinks I'm wrong. Really wrong. And apparently, it's a big deal. I've been on the record for at least the last year or two saying that the stretch part of a lift is more important than the contracted part of a lift.
How does an exercise make it into the top?
So I have 3 criteria. The first is high tension and high stretch. If I pull from here, I'm getting so much more of a lat stretch. You're gonna get this big stretch here, which you'll be able to see. I'm all on the stretch wave these days. But the thing is, not everyone agrees with me.
Science-based lifting has lost the plot because recently every science-based giant creator has been obsessed with the stretch.
You know, this new wave of training that everyone's in is the stretch.
If you think that stretch-mediated hypertrophy is going to be the silver bullet that gets you from making no gains to being the next Ronnie Coleman, not the case.
One of the main reasons why people disagree with Jeffrey on this is because Jeffrey typically cites research studies where they do long length partials on untrained subjects. I mean, there's even been research studies that show that untrained subjects build muscle doing cardio. Studies using untrained subjects need to be taken with a grain of salt. But kudos to Jeffrey. In this video, he did his own research study. He gets experienced lifters and tests to see if the lengthened position is very effective for muscle growth in trained lifters. If you don't know who I am, my name is Rios. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Science, and because I'm here to make fitness great again, I'll be looking at Jeffrey Nipples' recent research study and giving you my thoughts on it. Before I get into the video, if you're looking for effective programs to either build muscle or improve athletic performance, be sure to check out my 90-day aesthetic body blueprint or my 120-day peak athleticism package. But if you're someone who feels like they'd benefit from one-on-one coaching, I've also recently started one-on-one coaching. All these will be in the description. Before I get into my thoughts about the study, it's important for you guys to know how the study was actually conducted. So I'm going to play the bit where Jeffrey goes over how he's conducting the research study. If you guys want to see the entire study because it's actually pretty interesting, I'll leave a link in the description of Jeffrey's actual video.
We recruited participants with an average lifting experience of 4.9 years. Here's how it'll work. For the next 8 weeks, each subject is going to train one side of their body with a full range of motion and the other side with lengthened partials. So when they do curls, they'll do one arm like this with a full ROM, and they'll do their other arm like this, staying in the bottom half in the stretch. When they do pull downs, they'll hit one side with a full ROM, and then they'll hit the other side with all lengthened partial. And then, after 8 weeks, we're gonna use ultrasound to measure which side builds more muscle.
So to summarize, each subject trained for 8 weeks with one side doing full range of motion and one side only doing lengthened partial. And here were the results.
Okay, so I mean, is it
5.9?
Is it safe to assume that is basically the same?
No difference.
Now, just to be clear, statistically, this is no difference. If you just look at the graph, you might think maybe full range of motion did a bit better, but it didn't. I mean, this is what the graph looked like for the biceps. Here, it definitely looks like lengthened partials came out on top, but no, there was no statistically significant difference here either. That's because you need to account for random variation, genetics, measurement error, etc. And so, if the difference isn't big enough, you just can't score it as an actual difference.
So yeah, full range of motion did slightly better than lengthened partials, but there was no statistical difference, as long length partials essentially did just as good as full range of motion. After discussing the results, Jeffrey made one stupid take on how to interpret the results.
Oddly enough, this study did convince me that lengthened partials are worth doing. And I've actually been including them more in my own training since our study. That's because if I can get the same results with half the range, that's pretty sweet. On some exercises, doing a full range of motion feels a lot harder or it's more annoying. So why go through that extra pain of doing the full squeeze if it's most likely not giving you any extra gains? Think about it. According to our study, even when the subjects completely cut out the squeeze on every single exercise, they still made the same gains.
One of the big issues I have with Jeffrey is that he's so narrow-minded and only thinks about things in terms of bodybuilding and hypertrophy. Only doing lengthened partials is such a stupid idea. If you only do lengthened partials, then you'll only be strong at the beginning of the range of motion. And believe it or not, real life, aka daily activities and sports skills aren't just done in the stress position or at the beginning of the range of motion. The way I would interpret these results is why not train at a full range of motion, as you're gonna build the same amount of muscle as long length partials, but you'll actually be strong throughout the entire range of motion. Again, life and sports aren't done exclusively in the lengthened position, so you shouldn't only be training the lengthened position in the gym. At least this dude Milo, who's pretty gay for the stress position, has now claimed that he's changed his stance a little bit and is not as hyped up about the stress position as he was before the results.
Do you feel like that with this study, you would walk back your enthusiasm for lengthened training, or do you feel even more enthusiastic about lengthened training?
I would say a single study should only shift your enthusiasm by so much. And in this case, with the results being null, meaning no difference in hypertrophy between full range of motion length and partials, it shifts my prior stance by a slight amount towards the effect being smaller than before.
So to summarize, before and after this study, my opinion hasn't changed. Going through a full functional range of motion is the best way to train. But believe it or not, this study isn't the reason why I think Jeffrey's a loser and why I hate him. And when I mean hate, I don't mean personally. I think Jeffrey Nipples is probably a nice guy, and just like me, he's trying to give everybody the best advice so they can reach their fitness goals. I mean hate in terms of weightlifting and training philosophy. I have two main issues with Jeffrey. One being his overemphasis on stability. I mean, this dude is so obsessed with stability, he makes the most ridiculous exercises like this dumb shit where he goes prone like Call of Duty on a lat pull down. Shoulder stability, trunk stability, hip stability are so important for daily activities in sports. When you're standing up, core stability will always be the limiting factor. So essentially everything in daily life. So if you're taking the core out of every single exercise in the gym, you're gonna have a weaker trunk. So essentially all the lifts that you're doing in the gym aren't even gonna translate outside the gym because you won't even be able to use the strength that you're building on these stupid machines because your core is gonna give out first. And also having weaker stabilizers will make you far more injury prone. And my second issue with Jeffrey is his obsession with the lengthened position, but not in the way he discusses it in this video. I've always stated before that the lengthened position seems to be very important for hypertrophy. My issue with Jeffrey is that he's so obsessed with the lengthened position that he creates these ridiculous exercises where he's trying to get into these maximally stressed positions.
What is optimal training technique? Here's what we found out. First, range of motion is the most important factor. You need to use a range of motion that gets the muscle fully stretched. You can do that by using a full range of motion with a deep stretch or by using long length partials.
Again, I've always said that the lengthened position seems to be pretty important for hypertrophy, but Jeffrey has taken this to the extreme. At least he isn't as bad as his stupid brother Marlon Israel, but he does do these ridiculous maximally stretched exercises and then somehow claims that they're better than normal range of motion. The study that Jeffrey just did not look at if these maximally stretched positions are better than just standard full range of motion. I mean, look at the way that these subjects are doing exercises. They're just doing standard full range of motion, aka doing exercises normally, rather than doing these extreme range of motion exercises. In my opinion, when it comes to full range of motion, you should just go through a functional range of motion, aka doing exercises like a normal person. So none of this ridiculous garbage. And I'd even argue that these stupid maximal stretch exercises are even worse than just doing them normally, as you have to sacrifice so much load to do them. And I also believe that you should train all muscles in their lengthened and shortened positions. I think Jeffrey does agree with me on this one because I think I've heard him say that you shouldn't just do exercises in their lengthened position, so I'm happy he said that. I believe that training in the lengthened position is very important, but it's very overrated, and it's not a blanket statement that you should be applying to every single exercise and every single muscle. Here's my final point. If all muscles responded well in their lengthened or maximally lengthened position, why don't we do bicep curls and pronation? So that's the end of the video. I recently made a video where I reacted to Jeffrey Nipples' shoulder exercise tier list, which you should check out.